challenging and most fulfilling role. My husband and I live in Bedford now with our 3 children. We have a 17-year-old daughter, Taylor, who's getting ready to head off to college. We have a 15-year-old son, Duncan, who is learning to drive, which is terrifying. And we have a 12-year-old, my little guy, Griffin. You and I, we want the same thing. We want to win this seat, to send an unapologetic conservative to Washington. We cannot let Shaheen 2.0 win this seat because the Democrats are completely crazy and out of touch, and I refuse to sit by while they try to turn our country into a socialist nightmare. So I'm running for Congress because we have a country to save. We have our families and our freedoms to defend, and I felt a deep sense of urgency to stand up and fight for the future for our next generation. As a mom, I want the best possible future for my children and children all across our Granite State. I want them to live in a country that is safe and free and full of opportunity, and I've been on the front lines of raising a family and have seen how the radical left has taken over our culture, our schools, our politics. Instead of teaching our children what makes our country great, freedom, unity, hard work, they are learning to see the world through a lens of division and resentment, and we see what that's doing to their generation. This cancer of the left, we can feel it everywhere. Our traditions, our values, common sense itself are being chipped away at little by little, year after year. And it reminds me of our old man in the mountain, how it appeared that he collapsed overnight, but really it was a gradual weakening over a long period of time, and that's exactly what we see in our country today. The left has also attacked not only our values, but they're making life too expensive with all the reckless spending on everything except you and I here in this room, the American people. Their open borders, they're defunding the police, and demonizing ICE are threatening our safety. So I'm running for Congress because I think we can do better. We need leaders who will fight for faith, family, and patriotism, and that's what I'll be doing every day in Washington.
Anthony, I'm sorry, go ahead. And Anthony, in addition to the introduction, maybe you could enlighten us as to why you and not the other candidates.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Anthony DiLorenzo. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I was raised in a working class family, and my family often referred to our country as a land of opportunity. They encouraged me to work hard and to pursue the American dream. I got my first job when I was 8 years old delivering the newspaper. At 13, I was washing dishes for minimum wage, $2.30 an hour. I've worked hard my entire life. In 1983, I moved to New Hampshire to attend UNH. I also worked waiting tables while I was attending school. After a few years, I decided school was not for me. I dropped out. I didn't graduate. Started working full-time, was able to save up $7,000, and I started my own business in my driveway. It was hard. I was working full-time, raising a family, many nights lying awake at night, wondering how I was going to make payroll, how I was going to make rent, how I was going to pay the bills. It was difficult. Took 40 years, a lot of help from great employees, but we were able to turn that business into 40 operating businesses in 10 different states, employing over 1,000 people. Essentially, I was able to live the American dream, achieve the American dream, which is what my family encouraged me to do. When I get to DC, I'm going to fight for America First agenda. Peace through strength, domestic energy production, lower taxes, smaller government, fiscal responsibility. I will continue to support law enforcement, including immigration enforcement, but most of all, I'm going to DC to fight for the people of New Hampshire. I believe we deserve the opportunity to achieve the American dream. I'm going to fight for lower costs, higher wages, and the ability for you and our children to do what I did, which is achieve the American dream. Thank you.
Hollie?
Why me?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I mean,
Yeah, no, go.
I can answer now or I can answer later, but
No, that was part of the question.
I would go to my experience. Again, I'm a self-made business person. I started out with nothing. I was able to turn it into a significant size business, and along that, it took almost 40 years, but through that experience, I've gained a lot of knowledge and expertise, because you have to do many things. And our business consists of all different verticals. I've been in construction, I've built houses, I'm confident that the housing crisis we're facing is a solvable issue. I'm well-versed in construction, both in residential construction and also commercial construction. I know what it's like to lead, or what it takes to lead people, to get my father said to me a long time ago, he said, if you are exercising your authority, you are losing. What he meant by that is you can't demand people do something. You have to get them to work with you, to understand what the vision is. And I'm good at that. And when I get to Congress, I intend to work across the aisle to accomplish things, to bring results. Because if I did one thing during the last 30 plus years, it's bring results. You do not get to where I got to in the private sector without bringing results. And Washington, D.C. is in desperate need of somebody with common sense, business practices, and the ability to bring results.
Thank you. Holly?
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. I think it's really important that you hear all of us. I'm Hollie Noveletsky, and I am also running for CD1. My background, I am a second-generation structural steel fabricator. I own Novel Iron Works. We do anything from a simple house beam to the skyscrapers in Boston. I'm also a nurse practitioner, and I'm honored to say a woman that I worked with 40 years ago as a nurse practitioner is here tonight. But I'm a geriatric and a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I did most of my career in dementia care. But I've also had the opportunity as a nurse practitioner to do some amazing volunteer work. I went to Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, Oklahoma tornadoes. I worked at Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, the poorest county in this country, and I went to the Maine ice storms. And I also went overseas, and I worked with the victims of the Blood Diamond War, working in the amputee camps, and working with women who had been held as sex slaves. I'm also a veteran, 8 years in the Army Reserve Nurse Corps, 2 years in the New Hampshire National Guard. My grandmother came to this country in 1913 to escape the pogroms. She taught me to love this country. She would say, this country has been good to us. You love this country. And my father was a Merrill's Marauder. He taught me to fight for this country. So between my father and my grandmother, I've learned to love this country and to fight for this country. And this country is worth it.
Holly, why you?
Why me? Because for the past 25 years, I have been fighting for the American worker. I've been fighting at the state, national, and regional level, and I'm proud to say that New Hampshire has passed Buy American, because without good jobs, you can't afford your home, you can't afford your eggs, you can't afford your gas. So I will always fight for the American worker, and that's why I have a proven record.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with Melissa, then Anthony on this one. When you get to Washington, what is your one or two priorities? Melissa?
Okay, thank you. Well, my background is in finance and accounting. As I mentioned early in my career, I was a financial auditor. I started out right after the Enron scandal when Sarbanes-Oxley was being rolled out. So I spent a lot of time implementing and testing controls. And those are exactly the kind of skills that we need in Washington right now. So my priorities are going to be to stop the reckless spending and to drain these fraud factories that are stealing our resources. So like President Trump, I have a business mindset. I will bring that accountability and discipline to Washington. And I don't know about you, but I'm very angry about all the fraud that's being uncovered every day, the massive fraud in Minnesota, in California, in Maine, in Massachusetts. The list grows longer every day. And I'm excited that President Trump and his administration are focusing on this issue, and that he has tasked JD Vance with putting together a task force on this issue. And I would love to be there involved in fighting this fraud and bringing those skills there that I have. I would love to serve on the oversight committee, holding bureaucrats in Washington accountable for this fraud and for the waste and for everything that they are doing in Washington that we know is corrupt, and that we just really need to be holding them accountable. So those would be my priorities in Washington.
Anthony?
Yes. When I get to D.C., I'd like to focus on the issues that are most important to the people of New Hampshire, and those revolve around affordability. We have an energy crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have a wage crisis. Housing prices in New Hampshire have outpaced wages over the last 20 years, 3 to 1. That is unacceptable. At the same time, we have people in the federal delegation that are not representing our state properly. They voted against lower taxes in the recent largest tax relief in American history. They voted against eliminating taxes on Social Security for New Hampshire seniors. It's unacceptable. We are not being represented properly. I will fight for lower taxes. I will fight for job creation, something I've done my entire life. I've created over 1,000 jobs. I'm talking good-paying jobs. I will fight to help reduce our energy costs in New Hampshire. In addition, fiscal responsibility is very important to me. In the private sector, I would have never been able to get to where I got to if I wasn't fiscally responsible. The way our government spends money, again, is inappropriate and it's unacceptable. And when I get to DC, I will fight for fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Holly, then Brian.
So the two issues I hear going around the state from everyone, affordability and security. Affordability for all of us is housing, health care, especially now with the Medicare Advantage up here. It's become a big issue. Energy and jobs. So I would like to address the affordability issue by addressing manufacturing, growing manufacturing. If we want to grow manufacturing up here in the state, we need to address energy. If we want to address energy, we need to address the infrastructure for it. We need to address the energy grid. That's all infrastructure spending. So I would like to focus on infrastructure, making sure that our roads, our bridges, and our energy grid is secure and strong so that we can grow our energy. We can grow manufacturing. If we grow jobs, we grow wages, we grow opportunity, and we grow a tax base. It's a win-win-win. The other issue that I'd like to focus on is security, immigration, closing the borders, making sure they still remain closed, taking care of illegal immigrants because they undercut wages, they undercut security. This is a big issue. I would like to address those two main issues.
Okay, yes, affordability is probably one of the top priorities of everyone's mind here in New Hampshire. Last fall, I went down to the Department of Energy in Washington, and I spoke with them about what was going on in Michigan. Michigan basically has the same setup that we have here in New Hampshire. They have basically a retired nuclear Seabrook plant, like we have the Seabrook, and they're building SMR, small modular reactors, next to those plants. Those small modular reactors can use the fuel that's already in Seabrook. So we don't have to bring new fuel here. The fuel that's being spent and stored down in Seabrook, they can be used in these new molten salt reactors. So when you think of these reactors, the old rods, 95% of the rod was uranium-238, and only 5% of the rod was uranium-235. It's the uranium-235 that runs Seabrook. So the other 95% of the rod is just sitting there, and now we have the technology to use it, and it's safer today. You're talking about 100 years worth of energy just sitting in Seabrook if we go forward with this. Seabrook number 2 has already been approved here in the state of New Hampshire. So the infrastructure has already been built out down in Seabrook. You don't have to build that infrastructure up. The number one thing hitting in your pocket today is your energy prices. New Hampshire's paying 30% extra in their energy prices. When I go to Washington, I want to get on a nuclear subcommittee, and I want to make sure that the SMRs get put forth here in New Hampshire. I've been talking about this since August, and now the governor's talking about it. The governor actually just directed the Department of Energy for the state of New Hampshire to research putting SMRs next to Seabrook. So the conversation is going forward. Department of Energy is coming up here in the next 2 months, and we're going to be holding a nuclear summit here in New Hampshire. We're going to discuss New Hampshire being the host state for energy. Have cheap energy here, and we'll sell it to the surrounding states. That's the way it should be. My second priority, like Holly said, getting infrastructure for the state of New Hampshire, getting money for our roads. An example, the New Hampshire DOT here in New Hampshire. They have 700 parcels of land that they're just sitting on. These are all parcels of land that exit ramps, like the Northern Pass, all that. They haven't been able to sell it. I wrote a bill, I'm going to be speaking before the Senate next week, to allow the NHDOT to sell that land back to anybody who wants to buy it, then use that money for our roads and our bridges and our infrastructure. So not creating new spending, we're using the money that's already here in the state, and we're going to repair our roads. So I think that legislation is going to go forward. Senate President Carson's on board with it. I think it's going to happen. So infrastructure.
Thank you. So we'll go with, on this one, with Holly first and then Brian. So Iran is the issue of the day. I mean, literally, it's the issue of the day. We all know about the ceasefire. What we do know is that we've obliterated the nuclear capacity during this last time and also back in June. President Trump, in the last 5 or 6 weeks, has talked about regime change, getting rid of the enriched uranium, opening the Strait of Hormuz, and an unconditional surrender, which, frankly, none of them have happened yet. So my question is, starting with Holly, is what do you see as a satisfactory outcome that would allow us to leave?
We know that Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism around the world. And they have been after and killing Americans for 47 years. They're responsible for over 1,000 soldiers being killed with IEDs. And they have sponsored terror both on our land and around the world. We need to make sure that they never have a nuclear weapon. We need to make sure that their nuclear material is gone. And we need to make sure that the people of Iran, the 70 to 80% of the people of Iran are secure. We can't.
Holly, how would you say, you said getting rid of the nuclear
Material.
enriched, how would we do that from here right now?
That's the part of the negotiation that's going on now, is how to make sure that that material is taken out. So I'm not going to get ahead of the president on how they're going to get it out, but they do need to make sure that it is part of that discussion.
Brian?
I mean, yes, I agree with Holly. For 47 years, Iran's been the #1 state sponsor of terrorism across the United States. They killed over 30,000 of their own citizens for rioting against the government this year alone. That regime needs to be deposed. We don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want them holding the world hostage with a nuclear weapon. We want the Strait of Hormuz opened up. Free trade, free oil for the rest of the world. Get everything flowing again. You know, with the ceasefire today, oil prices went down to $75 a barrel from 100. It was over 100. So it's
Brian, how do we have a regime change?
That's a very good question. They got rid of the old.
And I'd like to come home. I think that the people of, I have friends over there with children, their sons fighting right now. I would hate to be in that position. I don't want to see any American loss of life. So again, the president's responsibility is to neutralize the threat, which I believe he's done, and he needs to come home, and we need to focus on the issues that are facing the American people. And those are primarily, like we've all discussed, they're affordability issues.
Melissa, how do we leave Iran?
Well, so I was born in 1979 when this regime came to power. So my entire life, just told you how old I am, by the way. So my entire
We're all doing
life,
the math here.
They have been exporting terror around the world, and so I think that the outcome is lasting peace, not allowing them the capabilities to be in a place where they can rebuild again, because I want to hand down a safer, more peaceful world to our children, to our next generation. And I trust our commander-in-chief. We don't have all of the information that they are working with. I trust that he has he has strong leaders around him in Marco Rubio and in J.D. Vance. And I am confident that with that leadership, they are going to do exactly what we need to do to achieve that goal of lasting peace, which is what President Trump said he wanted, was to have peace in the region.
This next one will be Brian and then Melissa. AIPAC is a very powerful Israeli lobbying group in Washington. Representative Pappas received $300,000 in 2024. There were 365 members of Congress and candidates who received money from AIPAC in 2024. So my question, which is a pretty simple one, have you or would you accept money from AIPAC?
I've not had any discussions with AIPAC. I did go to Israel last December before all this started, so it was kind of an exciting trip. It was very emotional, had a lot of highs and I had a lot of lows, but I know we cross that bridge when I come to it. I really haven't had any discussions with AIPAC at all.
Melissa?
I have not, and I do not plan to, but what I would say is that we should be spending more time talking about how we get people on our side of the aisle to contribute to candidates rather than talking about where we're not taking money from, because we see the millions pouring in on the Democrat side, so.
Holly. AIPAC.
AIPAC. So in full disclosure, I am Jewish. My stepmother's Israeli. I did speak to AIPAC last round, just to see what their guidelines were, and they said that they support Chris Pappas. And I said, well, he doesn't really vote, he doesn't really support our issue, because it was when the Palestinians were protesting on all the campuses. So it doesn't matter. He votes the way we want. So I don't believe that I would take from AIPAC. It wasn't the type of philosophy that I buy into.
Anthony?
I'm not interested in taking money from any special interest groups, including AIPAC. I've been fairly successful in raising money from the people right here in New Hampshire. To me, that says that my message is resonating. One of the reasons I got into the race is because I see this as a great opportunity for our party, and I was concerned about the candidates in this race ability to raise the resources to win the race. We cannot win this race without resources, and I've been successful so far in raising money from the people of New Hampshire to fight the Democrat Party, and that's what I intend to do.
Okay, this one, Anthony, then Melissa. On health care, we know that the Biden subsidies were put in place during the COVID. They ran out at the end of the year, and now we don't have any of those extended subsidies for the premiums. Meanwhile, over the last 10 years, Republicans have talked about HSAs and various other things, but frankly, nothing has happened from the Republicans either. So my question is two parts. One is, would you support a brief extension of the subsidies or none? And the other one is, what do you tell people whose premiums have been gone up considerably since the first of the year? Anthony?
Yeah, I could talk about healthcare for a lot longer than 2 minutes, but I'll try to keep it to that. I remember when they passed the Affordable Care Act. Our management team was in panic. When they first announced it, they said that it was mandatory that we comply, that we partake in the Affordable Care Act, which we knew immediately it was not affordable. We sat down together. We were fortunate enough to come up with a way that our corporation did not have to participate in Obamacare. We were able to find independent health care to ensure the people that work with us and their families. So I'm thankful of that. I believe Obamacare is a example of the government getting involved in the private sector and really messing it up. And their policy of taking our tax dollars and giving it to healthcare providers is unacceptable to me. That money, if they're going to do subsidies like that, that should go to the taxpayer and let them decide where they want to spend their money. The biggest issue with Obamacare is they've limited the amount of people that are in the market, the amount of insurers, the amount of, it's not a capitalistic approach to the situation. And because there's not competition in the marketplace, and there's I recently went to the insurance market, I could get one insurer. That's unacceptable. When you have one person providing a service, you are not going to get the lowest price. And that is what's happening with Obamacare. So I agree with the fact that Congress has been remiss in solving this problem. And the bottom line is, when I get to Congress, I will continue to do what I've done my entire career, which is bring results. And I intend to work on solving the healthcare crisis.
Anthony, would you extend the subsidies for a short time until some of these?
Not independently, just extend them. I would want to see a comprehensive plan. And again, we don't have enough time to get in the weeds on this, but there's significant problems with the legislature of Obamacare, specifically around the middleman on drugs and the law that requires the insurance companies are only allowed to take 15% of revenue as profit. And what that's done is the only way these companies can increase their profits is by increasing revenue, increasing your premiums. That is the system Obamacare set up. And what happened? Premiums went up. It was the only way health insurance companies could make money.
Anthony, I think we all can agree that healthcare is a mess from both sides. But what are you telling people whose premiums have gone up since January? Be patient?
Absolutely not. It's time for a change. We've allowed our federal delegation to misrepresent us for too long. They should have solved this issue years ago. We knew when this started, and in the private sector, we knew when they announced Obamacare, it was wrong, it was too expensive, it wasn't going to work. It's no surprise to anybody. So no, I disagree with that.
Okay, Melissa, healthcare.
Yeah, I would tell them to thank a Democrat because they're the ones who stuck us with the Unaffordable Care Act. The Democrats want to bankrupt us as a nation, as individuals. They want us so tethered to big government spending that there is no escape. And so they keep taking over aspects of our lives, healthcare, education. And so I would say that this is a problem with the way that Obamacare was set up from the get-go, and we can't keep extending it and putting a patchwork of Band-Aids over a broken system. We need real change. There's things that President Trump is working on, funding individual accounts, Trump RX. I really appreciate the MAHA movement because while those aren't immediate changes, if we want to bring down the long-term cost of healthcare, we need a healthier population. Right now, we have a chronic disease crisis in our country, and that impacts our loved ones, all the people around us, but it also takes a toll on our healthcare system and is driving up the cost of everything. So I really like that the MAHA movement is focused on healthier lifestyles. Here in New Hampshire, we love that, right? We love being outdoors, we love healthy foods, and I think that's the way that in the long term we look at bringing down those costs. And in the meantime, we look to fund things like the rural transformation healthcare that is coming right here to New Hampshire. So programs like that provide the funding directly to the healthcare providers rather than enriching these insurance companies that aren't truly bringing down the costs.
What is the MAHA movement?
Make America Healthy Again.
Okay.
Yeah,
the acronyms.
So
okay.
what RFKJ is working on. So.
Okay. Holly. Healthcare.
Healthcare. I do not agree with extending the subsidies for 3 years. That's what the Democrats wanted to do for 3 years, and guess why? Hopefully there's a change in the House, right? And the Democrats have control and they can make it permanent. There was an extension for a year. I think that's appropriate because we need to put something in place. I do believe that what we need to be able to do is negotiate health insurance across state borders, increase competition, drive down costs. We need to have increased transparency in billing. We need to put the subsidies in the hands of the individual so that they have the power of the consumer to help drive down the cost. They have the money, they have the transparency, and they have more competition. I think those are all important. We also need to address fraud. And under Biden's increased eligibility for Obamacare, people got subsidies who are making more money than my employees, and they're not getting subsidies. And they're really struggling. Our insurance numbers have gone up double digits over the same time that Obamacare's been in. It has not driven down costs for individuals. It's just been awful. And I would not extend the subsidies again.
Brian, but let me ask a little bit more of a question, is that what gives you confidence that the Trump Republicans, the Trump administration, the first term, really nothing was done with health care? Republicans are in Congress, both Congress and Senate and executive office, and really nothing has been proposed so far. So how do we move the dial?
Well, being up in Concord, I can see that there's a complete disconnect between the State House and Washington. We have a Republican governor, we have a Republican Senate, we have a Republican House, we have Democratic congressmen and Democratic senators. So there's a disconnect between New Hampshire and that. I can tell you that our entire delegation voted against a bill last year that would have saved you 11% in your insurance premiums. Those are the people that we have in Washington. That's a lot of money out of your pocket. Part of the big beautiful bill saved you about 2 to 3% on your insurance, but beyond that, Part of that bill was $204 million in a block grant coming to the state of New Hampshire, which is going to go to the local hospitals. So you're going to see that money. That's going to help you with your insurance costs and your medical bills and stuff like that. Beyond that, for the next 5 years, there's another $500 million coming to the state of New Hampshire from those grants. So that's going to help out our economy and help you guys in your pockets tremendously. And I think selling insurance across state lines, that's something that's important. You create competition in the market space, premiums are going to go down. Where Mr. DiLorenzo was saying he only had one healthcare or one insurance carrier, he should have 10 or 20 competing for his business. They'll drive healthcare costs down and insurance premiums down.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start with Brian and go right down the line again. On speaking of MAHA, RFK Jr., do you generally agree and support with RFK Jr.'s effort to make vaccines less of a mandate in schools? And if so, are you concerned about measles outbreaks that we've seen?
I was asked this question on WMUR, so I think about as far as the measles things goes, I think that's like kind of like education, let people know, let population know. I can tell you when I go to Washington, I will never vote for a vaccine mandate when I'm in Washington. You know, it brings me back, I kind of wonder where the ACLU was during the COVID crisis, when, you know, doctors and nurses are being forced to take the jab, and they're losing their jobs. Where was the ACLU defending their rights? I'll never vote for a vaccine mandate when I'm in Washington.
And when you say vaccine mandates, what about school age mandates? It's not the vaccines for children entering school.
I think there's only maybe one or two, maybe like polio. I mean, that's one, if you don't take it and you get it, you're in bad shape. You know, there's only 2 or 3 vaccines that people really need to take for their lifetime. Giving kids 100 vaccines, and we're seeing, you know, all the brain damage it's doing in kids and the autism and everything like that in our country. I just don't support it.
Do you agree with RFK Jr. that there's a connection between vaccines and autism?
Absolutely. And I've seen the data. We've seen the data from the Lincoln Institute. I have it. We've seen it. We've researched it in committee up there. And kids that never got vaccines, there's a lot of categories where there's a lot of zeros. They're not getting these brain problems. You know, the dementia, the ADHD, all those kind of disorders. They actually did a study, and this is over 3 million kids. So it was a legitimate study. And if anybody wants those numbers, I'd be more than happy to provide it to you. So, yeah, I think they're engaging our kids.
Melissa?
Well, we don't trust the healthcare bureaucracy, and why should we after COVID and everything that they put us through? And that's why vaccine rates have dropped, is there's no trust there. And again, we have no reason to trust these people in pushing these vaccines on us. When it comes to measles specifically, RFKJ hasn't changed the recommendation on the MMR vaccine. I think that's something that the Democrats are trying to use, particularly Stephanie Shaheen is talking about this issue a lot. And the measles outbreak that's going on now is not just happening in our country, it's happening worldwide because of a gap in vaccination during COVID. So that talking point has completely been debunked. So I also do not agree with vaccine mandates. As a mom, I want to have the right to make those choices for my children and for our family. And we need to work on building trust back into the system. And you can't do that when you're requiring people to do these things, particularly after coming off of COVID.
Anthony, vaccines.
When I was a kid, I think we got 4 or 5 vaccines. Now I think they're up to 70-something. I don't know what the number is. It makes no sense to me. I feel very healthy. I don't think I need any more vaccines. I did not get the COVID vaccine. I feel great. I appreciate the MAHA movement, mostly because they're questioning things. That's the part I appreciate. And like the question about, is there a relationship between vaccines and autism or other diseases? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a scientist, but I'm glad that somebody is finally asking the question. In addition, the food pyramid. I believe that what the movement did with the food pyramid is greatly benefits our country and the people that live here, the health. Part of the problem is that Americans are not healthy, and a lot of it's related to our food, what we eat, and what's in our food. I'm amazed that Europe does not allow things in their food, and we continue to allow our food manufacturers to put things in our food that are not good for us. Lastly, I would not support a vaccine mandate, but I would support repealing the legislation that protects Big Pharma from lawsuits. These guys can force you to inject stuff into your body, and you have no recourse because our legislation passed a law that says you can't sue them. It's absolutely ridiculous. That's not in your best interest. I would work to repeal that legislature.
Holly, I'm old enough that I had mumps and measles and all that. So what do you
I'm
think?
with you.
You don't look it. So what do you think about
I think the best
mandates?
thing that's come out of the MAHA movement is the open communication between healthcare providers and parents and individuals. I think it's allowed the space for people to question and not feel judged. And I think that's the most important piece of it. Do we need all of the vaccines? I don't believe so. But there are certain ones that we need to protect communities, so.
Like, for instance, which
the
ones?
measles, mumps, and MMR.
MMR?
Yeah.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
And I agree with you that are unnecessary, but Google what is in that vaccine. Google it.
Yeah.
Melissa, what do you think about the MMR mandate?
Well, again, I don't think it should be mandated. I think that, again, to rebuild trust, we should know as parents what is being injected into our children and what is in these vaccines. And there needs to be a lot more comprehensive studies done because they really haven't. They just rolled these things out and, without fully testing what is in these, so.
Brian, MMR?
I think if you're elderly or at risk and you want to take the vaccine to ensure that you don't get pneumonia or something like that, it's
I mean, the
understandable.
ones for kids. The
Well,
measles,
for
mumps.
kids, no. I don't think there should be a mandate for it.
Okay, this one, why don't we go with Anthony and then Melissa first. So the affordability was a huge issue, obviously, in the last election. It's one of the big reasons why Biden lost, and I think everybody here would agree that he caused that inflation. It turns out the inflation in 2021 was 4.7, in 2022 it was 9, in 2023 it was 4.1, 2024 it was the last year of Biden was 2.9, and the first year of Trump was 2.6, and now people are predicting it could be 4 this year mostly because of the gas prices. What can be done to lower the cost of living?
The most important thing we can do is reduce energy costs. Energy is in every product. As far as the stats you just gave, I'm in the private sector. I buy a lot of things through my businesses. I was actually building a house during COVID. I do not believe that those figures that you just gave are accurate. I was paying 20, 30, 40% more for goods. I was driving a truck before COVID that cost me $50-something thousand. I'm a dealer. I get good prices on my vehicles. To buy that same vehicle during COVID cost me in the 70s. So I disagree with those. Furthermore, when the president left the first term, President Trump, inflation was at 1.4%. When Biden was in there, it went through the roof. It shadowed what Jimmy Carter did. When President Trump got in, inflation started to come down. It is not where it needs to be yet. We have a lot of room for improvement. But the thing you haven't mentioned is wage growth. During the president's current administration, wages are finally outpacing inflation. That is the biggest stat that is relevant. Inflation could be 10%. If your wages went up 20, you're okay. But if inflation's at 5% and your wages are stagnant, that's awful. So I want to point out the fact that the President Trump, has increased wages more than inflation, and that is very important.
Okay, Melissa, affordability.
Affordability. Well, I've spoken about this a little bit, but I mean, first, when it comes to gas prices, again, the Democrats love to throw this out there, but we all remember under Joe Biden when they were over $5 a gallon for months and months. And what's going on now is temporary. And with the ceasefire and with the Strait of Hormuz opening back up, I think that we'll see them come down quickly. So I see that more as a talking point for the Democrats. And when it comes to inflation, the number one thing we need to do is to stop spending money. We need to stop printing money at the federal government. So that really needs to be the number one priority. We are burying our next generation in debt. My children there are credit cards being taken out in their name, essentially, that they're gonna have to pay off one day that they have no say in and no way of getting out of. So we need to stop all of this spending in Washington. And I think, I've mentioned it before, but the focus on fraud is a really good place to start, because that's money we don't need to be spending. It's not cutting programs, it's preserving programs for the people that need them, and that's just the first place that we should be able to come together and have a consensus over. We shouldn't be wasting this money.
Holly, then Brian. Affordability.
So affordability, I see 4 parts to affordability: housing, healthcare, energy, and jobs. And we need to be able to increase wage growth. Wage growth, as Anthony noted, is finally outpacing inflation. But we have a lot of catching up to do, right? Because there was so much inflation under Biden that we need to continue to grow wages. How do we do that? We increase manufacturing opportunities. We reshore manufacturing. We grow manufacturing. If we grow manufacturing, we grow jobs. We grow jobs, we grow opportunity, we grow tax base. It's a win-win-win right across the aisle. We also need to address fraud, because fraud is costing everyone in this room, you and me, exorbitant amount of money that is being wasted, that should be put towards programs that really are for the most vulnerable. And that's it.
Brian, how do we make things less expensive?
Again, yeah, I agree. It's all tied to energy costs. So again, doing nuclear here in New Hampshire, I'd like to see it happen. You want to talk about bringing industry to New Hampshire? We've been also in talks with Google, NVIDIA, and about doing an AI plant in the north part of the country, up in Berlin area. That'd be great, because their lighting industry has basically been decimated up there, and they could build their own modular reactor up there. The leftover energy is enough to power the whole northeast part of the state. So that's an ongoing conversation as far as energy goes. The president put a 2-month moratorium on the Jones Act. So in the 1920s, the Jones Act, in order to protect American shipping, you had to have an American ship with an American crew in order to move fuel from port to port. Right now, those energy costs have gone way down by like 15%. So if I get to Washington, I'll ask for an exemption for New Hampshire for the Jones Act to bring natural gas here to New Hampshire. New Hampshire, we have a balanced budget. We should be able to balance our federal budget. They did it during the Clinton administration when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House. There's no reason why we can't do it again. It works well for New Hampshire. I think we're a very conservative state, and it's because we do those practices, and I'd like to bring that to Washington.
It's a good segue for the next one about deficits. So Holly, we'll start with you, then Brian. The deficit in 2017, which is the first year of the Trump administration, was $19 trillion. It is now, going through 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden, and 1 year of Trump, it is now nearly $40 trillion. So I think we can all agree that neither party has done much for the deficit. So let me ask it this way. Do we reduce the deficit by cutting spending, raising taxes, or a combination of both?
We do it by addressing fraud, first and foremost, and by cutting spending. I do not believe in addressing by increasing taxes. We don't put that burden on people. But we need to cut the fraud. We see billions that have gone overseas, and those should be addressed first. And then also...
Are there specific things you'd like to see cut in terms?
As for fraud?
Well, not so much
For
fraud.
spending? I'd like to see...
Like, where would we cut?
Yep, I'd like to see the federal government not being our main source of employment. I think the federal government could be reduced in size and be more efficient. I think we should go back to block grants for the things such as education. Let the government, the state government, control the money and do a better job of it. I think there are ways that we can cut back federal spending and federal fraud.
Brian?
Well, yeah, fraud is a big issue. Thank God we don't live in Minnesota, huh?
We're paying.
I know, we are paying for it. Fraud, again, she's right. It's tied a lot to fraud. There's $1.1 trillion of Medicare fraud over the last 10 years. That's what they found out. Your tax dollars go into people that don't live here in the country, illegal aliens. And that's not right. We need to stop that too. But I can tell you, part of that big, beautiful bill over the next course of 10 years, it will reduce the federal budget by $4 trillion. So that's at least a start. They're headed in the right direction. So that was part of that legislation that went through over the summertime.
Anthony, and then Melissa. Deficit.
I do not believe in spending more money than you take in. I think it's a huge problem in our government. I do not believe in increased taxes. I would challenge anybody to say that giving the government more money would result in better services. These are the same people that own a monopoly. I'm talking about the post office. It's a monopoly. They've been operating it for 250 years, and they blow $9 billion a year doing it. Why would you entrust them with more money? It makes absolutely no sense. The way to deal with the deficit is stop spending more money than we take in, a balanced budget, and grow the economy. We need to grow the economy so that in 10, 15, 20 years, the percentage of debt is much less than our GDP. That's how we have to deal with the deficit.
Melissa.
Largely agree that, yeah, we can talk about spending and taxes. Absolutely no new taxes. I've talked a lot about reducing spending, and then growth is the third aspect, that the third way that we get out of this. So we continue to grow that revenue side of the equation, and so that's the other piece that we make up. I think it's having a focus on this and really educating people that we have to stop spending money. It doesn't make life more affordable to subsidize things, because the spending is still occurring. You're still going to have inflation. So it's really driving home that that's the one change we have to make. We have to stop spending money. I really like the Trump investment accounts that he's rolling out, because it encourages, it's going to make our next generation think about being investors, not being dependent on a system, but really seeing their money grow. So we need more of a mindset of that in our country.
Okay. Why don't we start with Brian and then Melissa on this? On the military, I mean, I think the military has proven once again that it is an incredible institution in Iran, and President Trump has proposed a major increase in spending. At the same time, like every other department, there's lots of waste, and we've learned that Hegseth spent $23 billion and by the end of last year, because it was a use it or lose it, and he spent $200,000 on lobster tails. There's all these crazy items. How do you reconcile that between the waste and the increase of military?
That's the first I've heard of that. I did not know that. That's interesting. No, I think we need to support our military. I'm sure we have a lot of veterans here in the crowd. Thank you for your service and helping out our country. And we have to have a strong military so we can keep our position number one in the world.
Okay.
I think what we're doing over in Iran is very important.
Melissa, military.
Yes, thank you to all of our veterans who are here. We have the best and the bravest military in the world, and seeing the rescue operation, hearing what just happened in Iran is incredible. The technology that we have, and just the spirit that we don't leave anyone behind, that we stick together, is incredible. The lobster, I believe I had heard that that's actually a regular practice for certain types of deployments. So, but I don't agree with having to spend the rest of the budget. I think we get into a big problem with that across every department, where they have to spend their money or lose it. That is complete waste. So we should not be doing that.
Hollie, then Anthony. Defense budget.
I am the only one on the panel who is served. I do believe that that was right to have the lobster dinner for the soldiers as they deployed. I think that was a sign of gratitude. We should be grateful to our soldiers. They put themselves on the line every day, and we should be grateful. As far as budget, is that your other half of the question? We need to make sure that we fully fund our military. Our military should not be on food assistance. Our military should have the equipment they need to maintain themselves and their equipment when they're overseas. We need to make sure that our military is the strongest, because it's a deterrent. It is peace through strength, and if you don't have the deterrent, peace through strength doesn't work.
Anthony, you support the president's budget, proposed budget on the military?
I would first like to recognize the brave women and men in Iran right now, protecting our country and the families of the fallen. I think we have the greatest military in the world, and it's showing right now in Iran. It showed what we did in Venezuela. As far as military budget, I support the military. I, as a member of Congress, would not support giving money to any government agency that did not have accepted accounting principles. And unfortunately, the Pentagon cannot tell us where they're spending our money. That is unacceptable. The job of Congress is the power of the purse. I come from the private sector. I could never operate not understanding where my money went. I actually spend money on the 40-some-odd businesses that we run, getting audited financials to understand, to make sure that the financial reports that are given to me are actually accurate. We should demand the same thing out of our government before we throw money at something. Now, if we determined that the money, we understood where all the money was spent, yes, I would support our military. Ask anybody you know that was in the military about this use it or lose it thing. They will tell you stories that will horrify you. It's an awful practice. In the private sector, if we behave like that, we would be in bankruptcy court.
Okay. The next one will be Melissa first and Anthony. Transgenders. I think most people in the country, Democrats and Republicans, believe that transgenders, men shouldn't participate in women's sports. Charlie Baker, who is was a former governor of Massachusetts, Republican, is head of the NCAA, and his numbers show in 2024 there were 500,000 women competing in collegiate sports. 10 were transgenders. So I think we all can agree it doesn't affect our daily lives. But my question is, I'm sorry? Okay. My question is, who should control this? Should it be a federal law, executive order, the state, the NCAA, or even our local districts? Melissa?
Well, we already have Title IX, and it's very frustrating that it's not being enforced, and you can minimize the number of people, but it's impacting our everyday life. I am raising children right now, and it is trickled into every aspect of education. This concept of gender fluidity is everywhere. I've been asked by doctors. My daughter has been asked what her pronouns are. These are medical professionals. She gets asked surveys at school, the same thing. So you can say it's only a handful of people, but there have been real injuries. There are girls who are afraid to go into locker rooms. And even if that's one girl, it shouldn't happen. We already have Title IX. We should already be protecting our girls. I was probably one of the first generations that benefited from Title IX. I was a high school athlete. I have a 17-year-old daughter who is a high school athlete, and we need to protect them. I'm not going to stand by, well, the protections that were in place for me are taken away for my daughter.
Anthony, transgenders. As far as what legislature or what state, local, yes. I believe local power. I believe in local power. I would much prefer that we make our decisions here in New Hampshire than in Washington, D.C. I have a friend of mine whose daughter was playing volleyball in college. She had to leave that school, quit her volleyball career, because a biological male was allowed to be in that locker room. That is absolutely ludicrous. It is unacceptable, and I don't understand why we're allowing this to happen. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Okay. Hollie, then Brian.
We already, as Melissa pointed out, have Title IX, but we need to enforce it and make sure that it's protected. As far as legislation, I don't believe we should be allowing mutilation of our children under the age of 18. New Hampshire has passed that, and I'm thankful for that. It is a mental illness. In some ways, it's a contagion. We need to protect people, and I think that some legislation at this point needs to be in place so that we are protecting our minors.
I guess my question partly was, who should determine about transgenders? That should be a local issue, a national issue, or determine nationally, I should say, or locally?
I would say it's a national issue because I think there is such pressure at the local level of people being called transphobic and social pressure that we need to protect the most vulnerable, and those are our children.
Brian.
So yes, I think it should be a national issue too. Up at the State House, I've already voted against it a bunch of times. We don't want women in boys' sports. We don't want men in girls' spaces. We voted on that legislation. We sent 5 bills up to the governor that are being sent up there. They just need to make their way through the Senate about this very issue. So we've been talking a lot about it up at the State House. And yeah, I'm against it. There should not be men in girls' sports.
Okay, so next question.
Can I
Go
make
ahead,
one more
Anthony.
comment? I just want to point out that our entire federal delegation voted against a law that would prohibit biological men in women's spaces. I just want you to know that. That's who's currently representing us. Again, unacceptable.
And Stephanie Shaheen, who would like this seat on the other side, has already said she thinks it should be determined on a case-by-case basis. So I'm not okay with that.
But Anthony, you said that you wouldn't put it at a federal level.
I'm not saying I'd put it at a federal level. What I'm saying is our current representation voted against protecting women in women's spaces.
Right, but you said you would leave it at a local level to make that
I
determination.
believe all...
So that's the same thing.
Can I answer? I believe all issues should be, I'd much prefer them dealt with at a local level. I'm not talking about whether or not it should be at a local level. I'm just specifically pointing out what happened in the past, that our delegation voted against protecting women.
Melissa, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, no, I think, again, Stephanie Shaheen, she wants to keep boys in our girls' spaces. I think this has, it is a contagion. It's gotten out of control. It's impacts every aspect of our life, and we need to move away from these agendas. We need to get them out of classrooms. We need to get them out of the medical profession. It's impacting healthcare costs when young children, and again, we have protections for them here in our state, but when young children are put down this path of lifelong medical treatments, we need to do more to protect children.
Brian, do you have anything else to say?
I just think this is an 80-20. 80% of the people at least don't want it. There's no parent that wants a boy in their little girl's spaces.
And I tried to preface the question by saying I think most people, and it is 80%, I've read too, the question was, who controls it? All right, so let's start, Brian, and down the line again. So I think you're all familiar with the Save America Act?
Yep.
And I assume you all agree with it. You support it. Locally, and Brian, you're going to know particularly about this since you're first up, is that our Secretary of State, David Scanlon, is being sued by the Trump Department of Justice for refusing to turn over voter information. That kind of information would be included in the Save America Act. Do you support Scanlon?
Yes, I support Scanlon. I think he's done a tremendous job here in the state.
Do you support him in his refusal of giving, and Governor Ayotte did the same thing too. Do you support him in refusing to give the federal government voter information?
From what I understand, he's not allowed to have that information from the state of New Hampshire, so he refused to give it. So he's protecting our laws here.
And
in the
how
state
does
of New
that?
Hampshire.
How do you square that with the Save America Act?
I mean, I support the Save America Act. I think it's very important. You should have ID. I voted on these issues up at the State House many a time already. We've done a lot of election legislation up there. You know, I think it's very important. We should not have illegal aliens voting in our elections. I can tell you one law that we just passed, it's going through the Senate right now, is we're not going to allow college students to vote in our elections anymore if you're not from New Hampshire. If you're a college student, you're in New Hampshire, get an absentee ballot for your own state and vote in your own state. That's how we look at that. I can tell you right now, I live in Manchester, and they bus college kids in on an election day, literally. So I've seen it firsthand. It's wrong. I think we need to protect our elections. New Hampshire's very fortunate that our election laws are very close to what the SAVE Act is now. There's not going to be a lot of difference when that SAVE Act goes through. So you have very good elections here. You have very good election integrity here, and Secretary Scanlon's an excellent Secretary of State.
Melissa, what do you think about Scanlon and the fact that he's refusing to turn over voter information, which is really part of the Save America Act?
Right. Well, I'll speak to the Save America Act first. So, well, breaking news, I'm a married woman and I figured out how to change my name, so I will be able to figure out how to vote with the Save America Act. We need to pass it. We hear this all across the state that election integrity is a huge issue, and we do, as Brian pointed out, we have very strong and safe elections here in our state, but other states don't. And with a wide open border under Biden for years, we had millions and millions of people pouring in, and we don't know how many or who they are, and they could be voting in our elections because California mails ballots to everyone, and they don't have the same security that we have around our elections. So this is one of the number one issues that we're seeing right now. And some of you may know that I do a lot on social media. I do short videos, and I've done several on the Save America Act, and these are always the ones that take off and have had millions of views because this is such a big issue. I think it's more than an 80-20 issue. People want safe and secure elections. We would have to figure out how to comply with the Save America Act. So I know that there's a holdup at our state level, but if it passes, then we need to figure out how to get that information, because we would expect every other state to provide that information, because we always hear that there's no fraud in our elections, but if that information's not being provided, how do we know that's true?
Anthony, Secretary of State, and how do you square that with the Save America Act?
Yeah, I went to speak to the Secretary of State a few months back to get his to get information about our election process. And I left that meeting after probably an hour and a half with a lot of confidence in him and his ability. So I have a lot of confidence in New Hampshire's elections. I do not have the same confidence in federal elections. I like the part of the SAVE Act that forces people to prove citizenship. In 1993, there was legislation, it was some sort of initiative to get voters to register to vote. And when you go renew a passport, if you get Medicaid, if you get some SNAP, or you get whatever, government services, they try to get you to, or they offer to register you to vote. They do not check if you're a citizen. Okay, now this is a legislation that was passed by our federal government. So they're encouraged, which I want people to vote. I just want citizens to vote. The problem is they are encouraging people to register to vote without determining whether or not they're a citizen. Voting is probably the biggest right we have as Americans, and we need to protect it. So I support the act.
Okay, Holly, it is now illegal to vote if you're not a citizen.
But you have to prove now that you're not a citizen, right? So I do support the SAVE Act, because we do need to have photo ID, you need to have proof of citizenship, no mass mailings of ballots, but there's a piece in the SAVE Act that protects our children from transgender influences in surgery, and I think that's also important. So I absolutely support the Save America Act, because if we don't protect our election integrity, all these debate, all these other issues are for naught, because we won't be the same country in 10 years. So we need to protect our election integrity.
Do any one of you agree with President Trump that the 2020 election was stolen?
I've seen no evidence to that, but I will point out, this is the only evidence I have. I have a really hard time believing that 81 million Americans voted for Joe Biden. I find that hard to believe.
Was the election stolen, yes or no? Pretty simple.
I already said I have no evidence of that.
That's a no. Brian?
I have no idea whether it was stolen or not, but I support them investigating it to see if there was some corruption during that time.
Melissa, yes or no?
Again, I don't know if it was stolen. There certainly were, again, the numbers look funny. There looks like there was a lot of funny business, but I'm more focused on going forward and protecting our elections going forward.
Holly, yes or no?
You and I had this discussion before.
I think we did.
We did. I think there were some irregularities, but I have no proof that it was stolen.
Okay. Back to international. President Trump campaigned on the end of forever wars. We obviously know he's gone into Venezuela and obviously Iran. He's also talked about Cuba, Greenland, and even making Canada the 51st state. Would you support any more international interference? And we'll start with Anthony on this, please, and then Melissa.
I am anti-war. I do not want to see any of us lose our children. I have 3 young children. Best thing I ever did in life was have children, and I don't want to see anybody lose their kids. I believe that Iran was a threat to our children. Those people getting a nuclear bomb would have been a disaster. I support his efforts there, but I do not support war. With him grabbing Maduro, I thought was awesome. That man was awesome. That man was killing our youth by pushing drugs into our country. You had Biden, who puts a $25 million bounty on his head but doesn't do anything. The thing I love about our president is he acts. When he sees an issue, he acts on it. He acted on Maduro. He acted on this nuclear threat. But I do not want to see boots on the ground, and I do not want to see us in any wars.
Melissa, any more adventures overseas?
Well, I trust our commander-in-chief. He doesn't want war either. He wants to be known as the peace president. So he makes strong, decisive action when he sees an opportunity. He doesn't want to be in forever wars, and it's interesting that people keep mentioning forever wars because we can all agree President Trump is completely different than any president we've ever had, so I don't know why people immediately go to forever wars when he gets involved overseas. I truly believe that he has America's interests first, that he puts America first, and sometimes that means getting involved in areas around the world. That does not mean war. That means decisive action when the opportunity arises, and I think that he's already proven to us that that's what he's looking to do.
Okay, and Holly and Brian, but I think the reason I mentioned forever wars is because that's what President Trump campaigned on.
Yeah.
So, Holly.
So China's our number one enemy, our biggest threat. And if you look at what President Trump has done with Venezuela and Iran, he has cut off the energy supply or severely diminished the energy supply to China, weakening them. This is an indirect assault to protect our national interest. Also, we have Iran, which is the number one sponsor of terror, has come after us, has repeatedly said, death to America. I think that was an appropriate intervention. Greenland, there's a lot of bravado in his negotiation. That's important. That's his negotiation tool. I think he's done very well, and he's been very effective with it.
Okay, Brian.
I don't think 38 days of war in Iran is a forever war. So hopefully the ceasefire will hold, and that was the end of this conflict over there. And Mr. DiLorenzo's right. Maduro was a thug. He was no more than the head of a cartel, drug cartel, putting poison in the United States. So I was glad to see the regime change there. And, you know, Venezuela, in the last 2 months, they've made more money than they have in years. Now that their trade is opened back up and they can sell their oil, and their money's getting back to their people. So that should help out that a lot. As far as Greenland goes, I think there was kind of a little bit of posturing, and all of a sudden you saw all these countries send forces to Greenland to shore it up. So without doing anything, he shored up Greenland. So Greenland's going to be hard to take now. And as far as Cuba goes, we've basically shut off the oil supply to Cuba. They're in a little bit of an energy crisis and stuff like that down there. So hopefully that is not a war. That is something that can be negotiated diplomatically. That's where I'd like to see that resolved.
And you do know that with the lessening of the sanctions, President allowed an oil tanker to go from Russia to Cuba just recently.
Good. I mean,
That's good?
well, they have no energy right now. So, I mean, you don't want to decimate the population, right? You want them to have some basic services and stuff like that. The hospitals to have energy. So I understand.
Politics. I assume you all are encouraging President Trump to endorse you. Is that true?
Wouldn't hurt.
Okay, wouldn't hurt. Well, let me say this. I'd say it's certainly not going to hurt in the primary. When one of you gets to the general election, his poll numbers aren't so good right now. I think we all can agree with that. And okay. We look at different polls. I've looked at half a dozen of them last night, and they all are, Mr. Trump is underwater. You've got Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson really disagreeing with him on the Iran war. I mean, how do you explain the lower poll numbers if you believe them? I guess that's the first question. That would be the first question. And then do you think they're going to be a drag on you in the general election? And why don't we start with Holly and then Brian?
So whether you like President Trump or not, you don't have to go to dinner with him. But his policies have been good. America first. And that's what's important. We need to be able to, as Republicans, speak to the policies and to let people understand how they have affected us at the kitchen table. We're working on growing opportunities here in the United States by reshoring manufacturing, increasing our energy production. This is all good. This is all going to affect the kitchen table with affordability. We need to be able to speak to the policies in a way that other people who are not in this room can understand and appreciate what he has done.
Brian?
Yeah, I think his approval rating is a little bit low right now because of what's going on in Iran. Everyone's feeling the pinch at the pump. Gas prices are kind of out of sight right now, but we all know that that's just a short-term reality. Things are going to get back to normal. Like I told you earlier, it's down to $70 a barrel for gas now. So, I mean, it's coming down. You're going to see that in the next coming month. I think he needs to concentrate on the economy because this economy is a strong economy, but I think once we get through this conflict, you're going to see the United States economy really take off, and I think that's going to help us in the midterm elections.
Okay, Anthony, and then Melissa. Anthony, how do you explain the low poll numbers right now?
The president came out a week or so ago and he said 93 to 97% of the press he receives is negative. Think about that. I would venture to say that if Pope Leo had 93 to 97% negative media, his ratings might be lower as well. In fact, there's a story that the president invited the Pope out on his yacht to have lunch. And the Pope's hat blew in the water, started going away. Secret Service was panicked. They didn't know what to do. And the president stood up and said, "Don't worry, guys, I got it." The president walked on water and and he grabbed the hat. The next day, the liberal media said, "The president can't swim."
Melissa, poll numbers.
Well, I like what Senator Fetterman just said. He just said that the head of the Democrat Party is TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. They are so obsessed with President Trump. So I think it's not that President Trump is going to drag us down. It's that the Democrats have nothing to offer the voters of New Hampshire. So that's how we beat them in the general. It's not about approval ratings. It's about offering people real solutions. And for those independent voters in our state, they are looking for the least extreme option. So it's very easy to see that the Democrats are the extreme party right now. Every issue, they are on the 20% side of every 80-20 issue, and that's what we focus on, and that's how we get those voters to come over to Team Sane like we are in this room.
You're obviously, all of you are very conservative, which is appropriate, but how are you going to convince, and let me just go down the line from Brian down, how is your message going to change, or is it, and how are you going to convince independent voters in the general election to support you, which you need?
I think you just need to talk about the issues that affect New Hampshire. The energy prices, we want to get the energy prices down. People want to create new jobs. I just put together a bill. I spoke before the Senate last week about the biotech industry, expanding the right to try here in New Hampshire. That's going to bring six-figure jobs to the state of New Hampshire. This is industry, if this legislation goes through, is a $125 billion industry. That'll double the business here in the state of New Hampshire. This is big-time legislation that's going. Kelly Ayotte, Governor Ayotte is supporting the legislation. We made some amendments up at the Senate. Hopefully we can get that through. And then the third thing is our border security. We have 58 miles of border with Canada. We need to secure our northern border. We don't want the drugs coming down here anymore. They're flying pallet loads of pot across the border. It's going down to Lawrence, it's bringing it down to New York. It's the meth and the fentanyl that's being trafficked back up through New Hampshire. We need to break that cycle. When I was in Pittsburgh that day, there was only one patrolman patrolling the 58 miles of border. So an interesting wrinkle that we've been talking about this, he proposed that, hey, down on the Mexican border, they have a retired U.S. drone that just flies back and forth. Like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. So I've been actually working with Senator Brown, and we're talking to the U.S. military and their surplus, and hopefully we can get a drone for ourselves up at the northern border. So I'm actually working on that now. I'm not going to wait till I get to Congress. So
Melissa, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yep, no, it's good.
Melissa, how are you going to convince independent voters to vote for you?
So these independent voters, they don't follow politics every day like you and I, right? So they are looking for someone real who they can trust and relate to and have a conversation with. They're people I'm with every day because my kids are in public school. They're part of youth and high school sports in our town. So these are the people that I'm around every day, and they know I'm running. We don't talk about issues, they just know I'm running. So they want to see someone real. So I picture myself across from Stephanie Shaheen. She's speaking like someone from a political dynasty would. She's not relatable. She doesn't know what real families are going through, and so I would be able to relate to people in that way. And I think it's important that we are reaching out to people across different age demographics, which is why I've talked about social media some. I think it's really important because our young people don't get their news the same way that we do. We're becoming increasingly digital, so we need to be on the ground, absolutely grassroots, being at every event like this and meeting with every single voter as much as we can, but we can't realistically shake everyone's hands 5 times, so it's using other methods, other means to get in front of voters to get our message out there. And I also think it's about building coalitions around these 80-20 issues. So we talked about MAHA, so talking about that issue and getting people on board with that issue. Those could be independent voters who believe greatly in health and they want healthier food choices, and they would come over to vote for a Republican for that issue alone. So it's finding those coalitions of voters.
Okay. When you said Maha, I thought actually you said Mahi when you were talking about. Anyway, Anthony, how do you appeal to the people in the middle?
There was a recent poll that came out that indicated that not only the undeclared voter, but actually both Democrats and Republicans are dissatisfied to a large extent with the gridlock and the lack of results in Congress. And I believe my message of a pragmatic, common sense business person taking those skills to Washington to bring results will resonate across party lines and with the independents. The problems facing our country are not partisan problems. And in the private sector, I've never sat down at a table and started discussing an issue by saying, what party are you in? It just doesn't happen. In the private sector, we work to solve issues and bring results, because if we don't, we go out of business. So that message is not a Republican message, it's not a Democrat message, it's just a message, it's a common sense message. One of the things I'm surprised about when I travel, that a lot of Republicans come up to me and they say this, they say, we want to see somebody that's willing to work across the aisle to solve problems. And when I get to Congress, that's what I will do.
Holly, the middle.
The middle. So many of you know me, and one thing you'll always know about me is I'm very direct. My message won't change. I am who I am. You have a right as a voter to know where I stand on issues, because if you don't know where I stand, you don't know where I'll be at the end of a negotiation. And that's important. You need to know where my red line is. You need to know where I'm starting. The middle, their issues are the same as ours. Affordability, housing, health care, insurance, energy, jobs, security, our borders, our law enforcement, immigration, national security items. They're the same. They're not an alien species. It's just how we message it. It's the same message. We just have to speak a different language. And we have to access them with different means to get to the different groups. So the message will always be the same. It's just how we message it.
We're running out of time. We promised to be 90 minutes. I'd like to give everyone a chance for a closing statement. Karen, should we take a couple of questions? Are you willing to take a couple of questions from the audience?
Sure. Yes.
Does anybody have a question from the audience?
Thank you.
Okay, sir.
What is your position on birthright citizenship?
Where you starting?
Okay, I'm sorry. Why don't we just start, Brian, go this way.
I don't think our forefathers intended for people to come over who were 9 months pregnant to come over here and instantly have a child and then get citizenship here. So that's not what our forefathers intended. I think it's for people that are living here and they have a kid here in the United States. So,
Isn't it in the Constitution?
excuse me?
Isn't it in the birthright? Isn't that in the Constitution?
The word
No.
birthright is not
Birthright,
in the
no, it's not in the
The
Constitution.
14th Amendment was put in place for the children of slaves, and the language is ambiguous, which is why the Supreme Court is, is reviewing this. And unfortunately, I don't feel like the oral arguments went that well to move in our favor of President Trump's executive order. But I don't believe that the 14th Amendment was meant to apply to today's situations because of the language in it. Birth tourism is becoming a bigger thing. We are hearing more and more about it, and it's scary. So I think if it does get struck down at the Supreme Court, that we should start to look at means at least of things like people here on travel visas. Any way that we can start to chip away at it. I think that the EO is sort of broad, and that's probably what they'll conclude. But
Anthony, birthright.
Yeah, I agree with both candidates. I do not believe our forefathers intended people to come here and have a baby and go home. My great-grandparents came here through the immigration system legally through Ellis Island, and I would encourage anybody that wants to come here to go through that process. I also agree that this will be decided by the Supreme Court, but when this first came out, I didn't understand, like, why is he going after this? I started researching it. There's like 500 companies in China that specialize in birthright citizenship. 500 companies in China. I'm certain our forefathers did not anticipate that, nor did they want that. That was not their intention.
Holly.
So it was originally put in place, as the others had said, for children of freed slaves, and also then later extended to the Native Americans. I do not support birthright citizenship. I think that when you have a child here and you're an illegal alien, then the child is illegal. Because once the child is born here, they are entitled to all the benefits. They get housing, they get Medicaid, they get food assistance, they get housing assistance, and by extension, the parent does. Because the parent is allowed to stay, and after 21 years, they can apply for citizenship. I do not support birthright citizenship.
Another question? Someone had. Go ahead.
There's been a lot of talk about the massive fraud, California, whatever. And that seems to be unstoppable at this point. But my concern is because the billions that have been stolen are Medicaid, they are federal funds. So that means we in New Hampshire, who don't do that stuff,
Right. We're
are
paying
paying
for
for
it.
that. So going to Congress, how do you protect people in New Hampshire from picking up the tab for that fraud?
Holly, why don't we start with this way?
So, under the Big Beautiful Bill, the Medicaid fraud, if a state, well, not the fraud, but if they want to give it to Medicaid to illegals, then the state has to pick that piece up. But we do have fraud here in the state, that we have to, not as bad as the other states, but we have to be careful. I actually was approached by somebody who provides veteran care, transportation here in the state, and they are concerned about fraud because it's a federal program that gets administered by the state. The money comes from the federal government and then is administered, and there's been some fraud, and they're trying to report that. We also have, I have a friend who has rental property in Nashua. Now, we're not a sanctuary state, but Nashua is a welcoming city. 8 to 10% of his tenants have been deported. So we do have to worry about it here. So we have to be ever vigilant, and we need to make sure that that's being addressed.
Anthony.
Yeah, obviously, we don't want fraud. I think that penalties for committing these types of crimes need to be increased. People will do what's in their best interest, and obviously in Minnesota, the Somali community found it was best in their interest to steal money from the federal government. Those crimes, the penalties need to be severe, and they need to be enforced. They need to be enforced. We need to ensure that federal monies are not taken and not distributed fraudulently. Furthermore, the politicians that allowed that to happen, specifically in Minnesota, should be held liable. Fry and Waltz knew about that, and they should be held accountable. I don't believe in coincidences, and I find it difficult to believe that all this fraud came out in Minnesota, then immediately we had riots going on about ICE. And everybody forgot about that. Now the riots are gone, and nobody's talking about what happened in Minnesota. It's unacceptable. When I get to Congress, one of the things that I will focus on is fiscal responsibility. I've done it in the private sector for 40 years, and I'll do it when I get to DC.
Melissa?
Well, there's obviously a level of fraud in every program, which is why we need smaller government all around. The smaller the program, the smaller the amount of fraud. But really, a lot of this fraud exploded because controls were relaxed, because things were taken out of place that should have been there. So with the daycare fraud, for example, there were controls in place that Joe Biden removed so that it would be easier during COVID. So it allowed fraudsters to take advantage of those opportunities. And so I think that we need basic controls in place, and there's a lot that we can do in Washington to ensure that the money going to the states, that they're having to provide the right documentation before we're sending that money out to them, and that there are analytics behind it. So if hospice centers in Southern California are growing by thousands of % over a short period of time, that should raise a red flag, and we shouldn't be sending that money to California. So I think that's where we start to combat the fraud in Washington. And that's where my background as an auditor really comes in. I have a deep knowledge of financial statements and accounting processes and how we would really start to work on identifying that fraud.
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. $1.1 trillion over the last 10 years of Medicare fraud for, the money that's supposed to be going to you went to illegal aliens. Thank God we have Vice President J.D. Vance sorting this stuff out. Company out in, there's one place out in California. I mean, well, Lord knows what's going on happening in California. You think Minnesota was a problem? California is going to be something a lot bigger, I think. They had 86 companies registered to one address out there doing the Medicare fraud. And they're just beginning to find this out there. So, I mean, yeah, we need to take care of that. And to answer the second part of your question, I think it might want to be based on population. New Hampshire should not be responsible. It should be proportionate. It should be a proportionate responsibility for it. We should not be carrying the foot in the bill for California, a little tiny state like New Hampshire.
Another question? One more. This is the last.
Do you guys support Thomas Massey's HR 645, which is national constitutional carry, meaning that you do not need a silly permission slip, right, to exercise a Second Amendment?
Yes, I do, and I would actually like to see a national ID for carrying a firearm so it could go across state lines.
Melissa?
Yes, I support it. I'm a proud gun owner. We have the right to protect ourselves and our families. And right here in New Hampshire, we have incredible gun laws because of people like you. And so we need that to be national. We need the same rules that we have right here in New Hampshire because we are one of the safest states, and we also are one of the most gun-friendly states.
Agreed. I support constitutional carry. I do not believe I believe it's a constitutional right to carry a firearm. I do so, and I think anybody that is trained properly should be able to do so as well.
I absolutely support it. I ride a motorcycle. I've gone cross-country 3 times, and I have not been able to carry. So I think it's very important. I couldn't get out of New England. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do our closing statements, please. And Karen is whispering in my ear and said you have to keep it as succinct as you possibly can. So why don't we end where we started and start with Brian and go down the line.
Okay. Well, again, I've lived in New Hampshire my whole life. I care a lot about this state. I love this state. I have a good business background. I'm the only elected official that's a candidate running on the Republican side for Congress. So that experience, I think, gives me a big edge. I know that when I go to Washington, from day one, I'll be able to hit the ground running. I can tell you it's a tremendous amount of information to learn that when you get up to the State House, how to function in government. It takes about a year to get your feet underneath you. I think that's a tremendous advantage for me. You can look at my voting record that I've out there. There's a lot of issues that we didn't talk about tonight, but there's a lot of stuff that I voted on over the last 4 years up there. Thousands of bills. So you can see my positions on that. I've already voted against having men and women's sports. The 80-20s that we have here in the state of New Hampshire. We got rid of car registration or inspection. That was very popular with everybody. Everyone seemed to like that one, right? Again, energy. So I'm already working on the nuclear energy. I'm working with the Department of Energy here in the state of New Hampshire and in Washington. The biotech industry, I just put the bill forth. We get that here. That's $125 billion in new jobs for the state of New Hampshire and new income. That's a tremendous, and I'm actually speaking in Washington in June. I'll be going down to Washington. I'll be talking before Congress and the Senate on the longevity community. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Melissa, please.
Well, this election is about so much more than politics or policies to me. It's about saving this country that we love, and that means building a firm foundation around our families. Strong families build strong communities, and that builds a strong America. And we absolutely need to focus on affordability, but we can't focus on affordability alone because we need to protect what makes us uniquely American, our traditions, our values, our faith, and our family. They're deeply woven together with opportunities, jobs, housing. I don't want to just rebuild our economy. I want to reawaken our nation. I want our next generation to be proud of our country, to stand for our American flag, to honor our traditions, and to love freedom. Freedom is our greatest gift, and we have a real opportunity on our 250th birthday to remind people what it is that our founders were fighting for. And I will fight tooth and nail to protect our freedom: financial freedom, education freedom, medical freedom, freedom to practice our faith, freedom from the heavy hand of government. I'm not running to climb a political ladder. I'm running on deeply held convictions. And like our hero, Charlie Kirk, I would love to be remembered for courage for my faith. Ephesians 4:1 says, "Lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God." I feel deeply called into this race, and I know that if we work together, we can win this. The Democrats, they think they have this in the bag. This is a likely Democrat seat. They are pouring millions into this race, but we are going to come in with a sneak attack, with a candidate they're not expecting that can stand across the stage from Stephanie Shaheen and point out her hypocrisy and her gaslighting, and that's exactly the candidate that I am. And I'd like to end with my 17-year-old daughter, Taylor. She tells me she's proud of me for being in this race. She's seeing me do something that I absolutely love. And so I would ask that you follow in Taylor's footsteps and vote for Melissa Bailey on September 8th.
Anthony.
I'd like to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity again. I spent my entire professional career trying to stay under the radar, out of the public spotlight. And now I'm here running for Congress. Why am I running? I'm running because I love our state. I care about the people that live here, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the future of our children, our grandchildren. I believe that the problems that are facing our state, largely focused around affordability, are solvable problems. I've been in the private sector for 40 years, and I've been solving problems the entire time. It's one of the skill sets that I will bring to Congress. I want to tell you a short story because...
Got to be really short.
I said short. I've already talked to you about how I started and how I started a business and how I've created 1,000 jobs. I had an employee email me this morning. He was a line cook at Chili's. He came into our dealership. He knew he wanted to do something different. He came in, a salesman greeted him. The salesman sent him away. He said, "Buddy, do yourself a favor. Go change your clothes before you apply for a job." He came back and we hired him as a salesman. That was 20 years ago. Today that man, his name's Armando, is the general manager of 2 auto dealerships in Salem, New Hampshire. That's the American dream. That's what creating 1,000 jobs does. And I will continue to do that when I get to D.C. My father told me something a long time ago. He said the best indicator of somebody's future performance is their past performance. I urge you to look at what I've been able to accomplish in my life, because I'm going to do the same thing for the people in New Hampshire and D.C. Thank you.
Holly.
Thank you. And I agree with Anthony. Past performance is really important. For the past 25 years, I have been fighting for the American worker and the New Hampshire worker. And I'm happy to say in New Hampshire, we passed Buy American because it's really important. It protected 500 plus of New Hampshire jobs and families. Because for every dollar spent, and we must never lose sight of the fact that the federal government and the local government doesn't make money. They take your money. And we need to invest that in our communities to reinforce our communities and to provide opportunities for our people. So I've been fighting for 25 years at the state, regional, and national level for Buy American. And that's my track record. But we also need to look at not just what we've done, but what's going to happen next September, in November. We're going to be having Stephanie Shaheen at the table. She's going to run on health care because she has a child with a chronic illness. I'm the only one up here who can talk about health care from both sides, not only as a provider who had to give up a practice because I couldn't get reimbursed. The reimbursement was such an issue. Our healthcare system is broken. But also as an employer of over 100 families that I've had to personally negotiate, not my HR person. I personally negotiated health insurance. So I see both sides of it, and I will be able to address that directly with Stephanie Shaheen. So I ask for your support, I ask for your vote, and I ask for you to check me out on social media, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, I'd like to thank you all. You've proven to be, all of you, articulate, capable, and committed. Should we give them a round of applause? Thank you, and thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let me get your contact info.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Hey, nice to see you.